Okay, hello to everyone. We will give another 30 seconds for everyone to join, and we will then kick off. Let's imagine some music playing on the background, which we didn't really prepare, but let's use the imagination. And soon we'll start.
Yeah, next time we'll bring some music to beat the silence.
Along with the instruments to play them, live music.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, maybe for the following time.
Okay. It's a learning number one, yeah. So the best practice to share. So we have to get the music right.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can start. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Yulia Homage. I'm based in Ukraine, working as a technical trainer in a tech company called NIX. So as a woman in tech, I personally have experienced lots of challenges that we are going to discuss today. So this topic is very close to my heart, and not only for my own personal journey, but for the potential to actually drive a positive change in the industry. And today is a first webinar in a series, which I'm happy to co-moderate with Alexis Plotnikos, who is the global data lead with over 15 years of experience leading a team in Microsoft, now a founder of his own data and AI company and a book author. So altogether, this brings with his leading of the diverse teams and expertise in technology and vision of AI. So it's going to bring an invaluable insights to today's conversation. And today's topic, so we are having Lorena Weber joining us specifically, who is an AI advisor and a former AI researcher at Amazon. And it's a true ambassador of the topic that we're going to discuss today, since Verena is also a creator of a Women in AI newsletter with mission to empower women in the industry and sharing experience from both freelance roles as well as the corporate ones. So big thank you for being here with us today.
Really happy to be here.
Same. Thank you, Ila.
Yay. And for anyone who would like to ask, in fact, any question besides me asking questions here today, we have a Q&A button in the webinar. So feel free to use that. We will make sure to address it either within the webinar itself, closer to the end of it, or we'll make sure to answer them after the webinar. Cool. So let's dive in. And I would like to start with some your own personal journey as well as observations. So what initially drew each of you to the tech industry, and how has your view of opportunities for women in tech evolved since then? Verena, if you may start, please.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was a little bit of a step-by-step process. It kind of happened, right? I mean, I originally studied statistics, and then discovered data science and machine learning, and then enjoyed that topic more than the classical statistics, and then wanted to stay, or I wanted to start working as a data scientist. So it was a little bit of a step-by-step thing, but I think in general, except for liking machine learning, I think what really drew me to the industry was that it felt more free and less conventional, when you study statistics, you have the option to work in finance or go to a bank or insurance or this kind of stuff. And tech just seemed very innovative and free, and it felt like you'd be doing, cutting edge stuff that's really going to change the world.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Alexis, how did you end up in tech, and what are your observations?
Yeah, I end up in tech maybe less powerful way comparing with what Verena shared, but it was conscious choice, and it was driven by this interest to think of data and how we use with data, how we can enable companies to grow with data. And I started in telecom business and then continued with consultancy, with Accenture, and so eventually landed in Microsoft. And my number one observations actually in Microsoft was the fact that women and data goes very well together. So I found myself kind of always managing more women in the team than a man, which was a really interesting thing. It's not typical for the tech companies. And then, and then the second aspect was that diversity of the women profile was really high. So we had people from all kind of backgrounds, from technical backgrounds and from completely non-technical backgrounds, like librarian or economist and so on. And they actually found them really very good with data. And they found that this opportunity of kind of building bridges in a company where you have to connect what business wants out of data with what you actually can do with data. This was a great role. Yeah. So building those connections, building those bridges, and still in a technology, and it still has a lot of that technological underneath, but nevertheless, it also has a lot of that communicational side, like really addressing the stakeholder needs. And it was, kind of super fit, right? And to transition to like why we have this webinar today, I was leaving with this feel that, women and data goes well together. When we're adding now to everything also data and AI, I felt like, okay, so women with data and AI goes even better together. And then I saw this article from Verena who said like, well, we're actually struggling actually to get that AI usage in the women community. And so I felt like there is something wrong with this. Let's talk.
Yeah, because when you said that women and AI and overall tech goes well together, I was like, okay, well, thank you for joining the webinar. That was a good discussion. No challenges there. Everything is doing great. Because yeah, I know that you have mentioned in your LinkedIn post as well prior to this webinar, because we were discussing the overall like challenges, like even still the AI aside, but how women are still facing challenges while navigating their careers in tech, in enterprises overall. And I think you've highlighted that women also have tend to have a heightened sense of responsibility, tendency to avoid conflict, and there were some other challenges that you were describing. So I assume this does impact their career development. That's what you were saying as well. And I wonder if you've also seen that in your experience, in your observations. And if so, how exactly does it influence, and what practical advice could you give to women that are trying to overcome this?
Yeah, I agree. First of all, it's a long question, but I agree. Let's start with this. And I see that this challenge actually for many women in technology, in IT, it starts often even from the hiring moment, right? It feels differently to be hired in those tech companies. It feels often that you even get hired, but you still need to kind of persuade that you're good enough for being hired into that tech company. Yeah. Even it's already acknowledged you are part of the company, but you keep going with this like, oh, I wasn't good enough. Yeah. So I need to always pursue my best. I always need to persuade, with everybody how strong I could be on those deliverables. And so this, I think, takes a lot of natural focus into that what side, like what is what you're doing, what is what you're focusing on. A lot of work, specific deliverables, a lot of colleagues which, expect you to be fast and smart and collaborative. And so this is this tendency which goes for, for women specifically to focus into that quality of deliverables. Like, am I good with that deliverable? Am I deep enough? Like, do I got all these different details? Huh? It's super depth in kind of this quality assurance. Yeah, you want to have this superb quality assurance stamp of what you delivered. Meanwhile, in the reality of many enterprises, it's not that much of what you should focusing from delivery perspective. Of course you should, but it's even more important that how side. Yeah, so how this appears to the others, how this appears to the manager, how this is being, so to say, positioned within the team deliverables or within the organizational deliverable. And if you get so much of your effort into figuring out what, and you spend all the time and all the energy in that space, you don't have enough of that positioning moment. You don't have this opportunity to tell the story about your work, to kind of get others even just to acknowledge what you've been doing. Yeah? In large enterprises, typically people don't know very well what others doing. And so if this, the best way is always to get somebody to talk about you. But to get that somebody to talk about you, you first need to kind of introduce yourself and introduce what you're doing with, right? And so this type of social aspect, I think it's very important. And that's what, again, where I see today that with AI opportunity coming through, this could be improved. I'm not saying it could be fixed, but it could be improved.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And I wonder if Verena has faced something similar. Like, I mean, being with women being too focused on the detail, on that shaping the perfect rounded outcome and deliverable and focusing on this too much. And have you seen something like this? And how have you seen this impacting their like visibility within the organization?
Yeah, first of all, let me take a step back and tell a little bit about my experience, because I mean, my experience was exactly different, right? Whenever I joined AI teams, I didn't have the feeling that there were, a lot of women, or that this would be a topic that's closely connected, right? I was mostly surrounded by men, and sometimes not each and every one, but sometimes you could even tell that it was to their surprise that I'm doing something technical and not I'm not the product manager, or I'm not the designer, the UX designer, or whatnot. So I think women really can feel this, right? They feel this pressure to fit in. They want to belong. They want to prove themselves. And then I think, yeah, on average, maybe there's also a little bit of lack of confidence in their own abilities. And this is then what leads to exactly what you described, Alexis, right? That they start getting so deep in the detail and really focus very much on delivering great quality work. That's one part. But I think the other, and that's also really important, I think women are often completely unaware that there is this second part to it, right? That it's not enough to just do good work, but you need to speak about it. You need to know people. I mean, I definitely was under this impression, right? I go in, I do good work, I get rewarded, and a lot of women that I speak to, they think this is the way it works, and then they see, okay, it's kind of not the way it works, but then how does it work? Right? So then you kind of need to understand the rules of the game first, or the rules of this corporate environment first, or tech environment. And I think this is often where women fall short. And then what they start by working harder, trying to make their contributions even better, and then they totally lose track of more important things like visibility or networking, building the right community around them. And it's kind of a vicious cycle, because then they feel unrewarded and unseen, which leads to a frustration, but this also kind of impacts confidence again. And coming back to my story, I think what really has helped me were these explicit career development programs that I was able to join during my time at Amazon, where exactly these clear rules were stated, right? This is what you need to do to get visibility. This is how you get a promotion, right? So this, and then I was like, okay, I get it now.
That's a very nice and well-structured path, and I'm sure not far from everyone has that opportunity to understand what's the path for you to grow within a given team or enterprise. Many people will just, and many women, and I definitely was one of them, will really think that it's the hard work that will bring you to somewhere higher than you are currently. So what advice, Verena, would you give? Because I think you mentioned this too in your newsletter, and this resonates. It's like with me a lot. Well, what advice would you give, like practical strategy for women to really balance this striving for the high standards, but with getting noticed and establishing, like playing the rule of the game? So what are the rule of the game and what are the strategies there?
Yeah. So I mean, great quality work is the foundation, right? So I'm not saying you should drop your standards. It's a little bit understanding, okay, like the 80-20 rule, right? So do I need to make it 100%? Probably in many cases not, right? Maybe if you have like a very important presentation, it makes sense to go to the 100%, but not always, right? And then really making time to make your accomplishments visible, right? So this can be, I mean, what I started doing really was sending a weekly summary of my accomplishments to my manager. And this was helping her in being supported in terms of knowing what I do, but also help me seeing what I've actually accomplished and keeping track of what I've been doing. Because I mean, also sometimes you yourself get lost in everything is moving fast and you forget about it. So but then also really I made efforts to speak in town hall meetings or just bigger meetings in general, went to conferences to present my work. I sometimes even prepared to speak up in important meetings, right? When I felt like, okay, I probably won't be able to come up with a valuable contribution on the spot. I took some time to prepare for it. And I really actively made time to network with other people. And that's also what I really would recommend everyone, because I think that's a big thing. Women often underestimate also the power of networking. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. And as you were saying this story, I actually recalled like a moment earlier in my career how I used to collect some feedbacks around my work on different training deliveries and overall any feedback I could get in the form of the screenshot. And I created a Word document on it with an idea to send it to my manager back then. But that felt so awkward. I didn't want to come out as desperate or something, but this kind of thinking started to like get reside in my head, but it really felt uncomfortable to do it. But from what I'm hearing, self-promotion is super important, plays a key role in getting visible, getting recognized, and then in turn having some career growth and not only focusing solely on the work that you do. But yeah, for someone like me back then, and for many women now, this will really feel like a bit over self-serving, inauthentic even. So maybe, Alexis, do you have any strategies? Like you've led a diverse team for over 15 years. Do you have any strategies how to still, like for women that are trying to build their visibility, how to do it, but in a way that feels genuine?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. And, to step back a little bit, I fully compliment what you just said about how awkward it is to, try to kind of position or almost like a sell yourself. Yeah, I heard this from one of my team members, and I said, we need to get you more known with the work you do. Yeah, and I use this word unintentionally. I say we have to sell this work to our, sister teams. And, she was like momentarily stepping back and saying, I will not sell myself. Okay. So please, we are not here for this.
There's some
And I was
negative
like,
image around it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a very negative image on that side. And then we said, okay, so let's use maybe some smaller tactics in a sense, which still helps to build that coalition and to get known. To what I've said before, it's good that you speak for yourself. It's good that your manager speak for yourself. But then it's even better when the people kind of surrounding you, they know you. They kind of offering some opportunities for you, or they refer to you, or they intensively search a connection with you, right? And I found like three different things which are not entirely correlated, but I think they all worked. The one is that, and it's to a point which Ren also was mentioning, is to have this intention and ability to ask the questions. Yeah. When you have those chances on our larger events or on some team meetings and so on, or even cross-team meetings, to have a couple of those questions which are prepared when you can raise fear, because it takes that good attention to you. If those questions are, sincere and they to the point, it gets that right and positive attention. Like, hey, we have some smart people who are asking questions, because this is part of the leadership, to always ask questions. The other thing what I found is this, I called this mentorship, but it's not only to get somebody outside who can, talk to you in some difficult moments or to help you with basic things, but it's really, I would say, more active mentorship where people, taking some really good and sincere effort in kind of making you better, grow your skills, observe you from completely different position, not the manager's position, but different position. And often these mentors, we really provided also some super insightful feedback to the managers or even to the skip level managers, right? Because they had a chance to observe a person in a different environment under different settings, and they noticed something which, we often miss in this routine work. And finally, I guess, getting that seat at the table through other teams, through either your stakeholders or your, sister teams or side teams you're working with. That's also a thing which will take you along, going from that self-promotional type of thing where you do not really self-promote yourself, but as you take that seat at the table and as you contribute, you're becoming more valuable. You're visible as a valuable. Yeah, you're doing just your job in reality, but because you're more actively doing this and you're appearing in all those conversations and those circles, you started to be much more noticed. And that's what you kind of want. You want to stay authentic. You don't want to create anything which feels bad for you or feels artificial, but you want to use every single moment where somebody takes a positive attention on your skills, on your expertise and your ability.
I just quickly want to add, I think also the word self-promotion, I think it describes well what it does, but it can feel a little bit too salesy. But exactly, I think it's more a way of finding an authentic way of sharing what you're working on and what you're doing. And it can be as easy as just, reaching out to other people saying, hey, look, I think we have some synergies that we could potentially leverage. Let's have an exchange on what you're working on, or even just asking people about their work, right? If you just say, hey, I want to learn from this, usually people are very open to sharing what they're working on, and then you can just have a few comments on what you're currently doing, right?
Yeah, so it's like always like a little bit getting out of your own shell, if I may put it like this, because we are very focused on
Exactly.
doing our job right, really proving everything about ourselves through the work, through some deliverable, while it's a lot bigger than that. It's about getting out, interacting with others, not being afraid to speak up for yourself, being curious about other people, like going out and ask, to really then bring in over time that visibility, so that through some time it doesn't feel artificial. It's just a way of interacting with people and being, brave about speaking up, basically. Doesn't feel
And business,
to be brave. Yeah.
sorry, I was just gonna say, it's always about relationships, right? And I think that's often forgotten, and women tend to focus too much on the deliverables and not on building relationships. I think the social aspect, what Alexis mentioned earlier. Exactly, yeah.
Cool. Well, I would like to actually drive to a question which I think is quite important in our webinar, because our webinar's title is Women, Careers and AI, a New Turn. So are we saying that AI has some potential to change that? And if so, which direction? Is it going to change it for worse, for better? And is it doing it already right now? Like, probably to direct this first to you, Verena.
Yeah, I mean, those are big questions. I think I'm gonna take a step back, and what I will do is just showing a little bit. I mean, we mentioned a couple of challenges, key
Yeah.
areas, where women could focus on and take some action. And what I'm just gonna do is take those areas and then mention some tools and how they could actually help you dealing with
Love it.
it. Yeah. Um, so we talked about visibility and communication, right? That's a lot of power lies in that. So what are the tools that you can use? So Gamma, for example, is a great tool that I also frequently use to prepare presentations. What I really like about it is that I usually just put in the content and that it generates me a presentation and I don't have to take care of the formatting. Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
still you need to do some refinement and also pictures and this kind of stuff. But I personally like it because, remember when you still had to spend a lot of time just aligning those boxes in PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So that's
So is
off
it
the
like
table.
the formatting and the design and picking some icons images? Is that able to do that?
It can do some icons, yeah, but I usually do the icons myself, but you don't have to do a lot of formatting. It has a lot of
Hmm.
nice building blocks that you can just put in. And yeah, for
Hmm.
me, it's usually a quick way to do a document or presentation. I mean, okay, if you have super high standards of how your design should look like, then, it's maybe your pitch presentation. Okay, maybe then, still give it to a designer. But if it's just a usual day presentation, it can be a lot of
Mhm.
support. Then, of
Cool.
course, I mean, large language models like ChatGPT. I myself prefer Claude most of the time when it comes to writing text. So it can help you a lot with being visible on social media, for example, if that's something you choose to. You can also, I mean, if you now choose to write that email with your weekly accomplishments and you want to find a nice way how to not make it sound too braggy, or how to introduce this new measure you're taking to your manager, I'm sure Claude can give you good suggestions that will feel comfortable to you.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then these emails will also help you tracking your own accomplishments over time. You could potentially even yeah, I've seen people who use their own GPTs to actually also store their notes so that they have access to all the notes that they've taken, and you can basically interact with your notes.
Actually, a
Um,
good point to use those notes not only to prove someone about what you've accomplished, but I think many of us are lacking this, moment when we can sit down and look back ourselves about what we've done. So good to know that there are also like some tools to have it, your own internal like note taking. Well, you can use Notebook for that as well, but still that AI is there as well.
Yeah, and you can then interact with it, right? So maybe you have like a bad moment, you feel like, oh, I haven't accomplished anything. You just go and chat a
Yeah.
little bit.
And it will return to you, hey, look at this and that in December 25,
Or
2000.
maybe, I mean, in Amazon, you had this leadership principles, and then for your promotion, you had to give evidence for certain principles, right? And then if you need certain examples, then you can just easily retrieve those from your notes. So it's actually pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah, then also I think it's a nice thing you can use to, I mean, prep requests that you have towards your manager, right? How can you phrase requests in a certain way that you feel comfortable, that are professional, effective, but also don't sound too pushy or anything. And for me, it just helps me speed up a lot of tasks. I think also in your work, probably there is ways to leverage that and yeah, use it to showcase your work, right? Maybe you have written a long documentation about a project, you need a quick summary. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, the other tools I have is Opus Clip. Yeah, this is something I mainly use to get clips of videos and subtitles. So this is especially relevant, for example, if you give talks that are recorded at conferences, for example, or if you go on online meetings and give talks, right? You could I mean, always depends, right? Maybe you also just share it within your team. I don't know it, but yeah, it's definitely a nice tool that you can use to cut videos into clips.
We should try it out for our webinar recording.
Yeah,
Try this.
yeah.
I'll test it. Never used it, never heard of it, but I'm gonna test it.
Yeah, it's nice. And then I mean, there's also Cast Magic that you can use to create a post on video or podcast material that you have. I mean, okay, that's now very much focused on social media, but also something you can use to build a personal brand with and create visibility.
That's quite a few of tools. We will, by the way, for everyone watching us, we will probably summarize those and share with you the links, because personally I haven't heard about most of them. So we will make sure to send it after the webinar to all of you.
Yeah.
Alexis, anything maybe from you? What you know could help in our still context, if you know, careers for the women, any like addressing any of the challenges that we described earlier?
Yeah, I think just building up on what Irina said already, for me, the most important aspect is probably that communicational aspect. So the LLMs basically hacked the way how human communicates to each other. And so it's absolutely worth to use it now for, summarizing, for positioning, from creating those very amplified and strong communications, which are really, almost perfectionized in language. Yeah? And I recall back, even in my years of Microsoft, there was a very simple system for promotion. Yeah? And it ended up with some tool. And in this tool, you need to enter the promotion justification for a person. And it works for everybody. Like whenever you are on a junior level or so on a very senior levels, it's still the same tool. And the key thing for us as managers was to somehow figure out like how do you put everything you want to tell for the justification of the person promotion into 1,000 characters. So 1,000 characters, including spaces and punctuation and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it should include, this like why you are promoting, like what is the organizational need, what is the growth, what is persona, achieved over time, and things like this. So there is, normally you would write 3 pages out of this, but you have to stick it to this 1,000 characters, which would resonate with all the managers who approve it afterwards, right? And so now I'm just kind of wondering, even like how we were doing this before ChatGPT came. But the point for me here is really to use these powerful language capabilities of LLMs to transform the communication. Either it's a summarization or it's specific language positioning. It works very well. And on that line as well, I recently discovered so-called Goblin tools. It's a special resource, goblin.tools. Strange name, I don't know where it came from. But the point is that it offers you a couple of those very simplified, exactly as tool type of applications. And one of them is to position, the emotional side of the language. So if you're receiving something, you can kind of translate like what the emotions are behind that message, right? And you can suggest a reply back. You can also create your own message, and you can regulate that, the level of emotional
Bragginess.
context there. Yeah, like you are
Make it
very
less braggy.
angry. Exactly. Oh, you may be moderately angry, like you can play with this, and it's kind of reformulates your original text. It keeps it there, but it gives you an alternative version, which is more suitable for, kind of professionally saying no to some project, or, asking for some strong participation and things like that. And there are even some more simple things, like, for example, you have a lot of thoughts in your mind. And as you say, you may have that notebook or somewhere, but you want some actionable things out of this. You can put all that thoughts and kind of ask to create a to-do list out of this, which again will kind of simplify this flow. Yeah. So I think these type of simplified, easy to access capabilities, they are free of charge to use. super simplified interface. You don't get lost, you don't get confused. You just play a couple of minutes and you will feel like you're proficient forever for this.
Cool. And I see that we have also some questions in the Q&A. By the way, we have probably a few more questions that I'm going to ask, and then we can turn to Q&A. Whoever hasn't yet published their question, feel free to use the feature. And okay, but I have a bit more personal question. What tools do you use the most? So stepping a bit aside from our careers for women topic, but what's that you use the most? Any favorite tools? Yeah.
Yeah, I already mentioned, right? I use Gamma a lot to do my presentations. I also use Claude all the time, be it for writing emails, texts, posts, brainstorm, just to give me names or give me workshop agendas. I also just sometimes use it to reformulate stuff. So it's really like my daily assistant. I also use Fathom or a MeetGeek to take notes during my meetings. So basically it gives me a full transcription, gives me then a summary and summarize also action items, which is really cool because I never really liked taking notes during a meeting because I feel like this distracts me from being able to listen. And I use Opus Clip and Cast Magic sometimes for social media stuff. Yeah. And one thing I also wanted to add is for networking, you can also really find cool ways to start a conversation on ChatGPT or Claude if you're feeling a little bit shy on how you can actually start a funny or meaningful conversation with people. Sometimes I also do that. Yeah.
Small talk trainer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think at this point, nowadays it's even super easy to start any conversation. You just come and say, okay, what do you think about ChatGPT, right? Or what do you think about ethical use of AI? And then you have a conversation going for hours.
I actually have one such question in the Q&A, but I don't want this to go for hours. I'm not sure we can afford that. But that's actually one of the questions that we do have about how to overcome the ethical issues when using AI, and especially the copyright topic. And overall, I think this is all in line as well with some of the people say that AI may just mask some of the cultural issues and may not provide any long-term fix, but only some temporary issues. But let's probably take it one by one. So maybe about the ethical issues when using AI. So how to overcome it, Alexis? Maybe if you have any ideas around it.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the way we see AI today, we mostly see it through these large language models, and we see this chat type of interactions. I would try to always validate it, right? If you're searching for some materials which might be a part of the copyright case, that somebody already published this, and you just you want to use this information, but you don't know the true source of this. There is a good tool now which called Perplexity. It's quite getting popular as well. It's a search combination with AI capabilities, which gives you all the sources where the information comes from. So you're not just taking something for granted, but you actually see where it comes from, and you can click down through and you can see who has published this. Is this authentic? Is this, real one? Or maybe it's just, some kind of invention of the, GPT itself. And I would again just double check the things which you receive from the type of facts, or when you're using for getting truly information for your own publishing. If you do some research paper or you writing something up, yes, GPT can. I'm using GPT, by the way, quite a lot, the paid version. But I would be very cautious and kind of double checking if it's really not just a quick fix, asking some simple question. But when you want to be sure that information you received is of high quality, is trustable, and it will be reused continuously for yourself, then do one more step to validate where it comes from.
Yeah, thank you for that. And coming to the other question, so more around AI's role in fixing the issues that we've discussed. So yeah, many say, as I mentioned, that the tools may just mask the cultural issues, and that it's not gonna provide any long-term fix. So Verena, maybe if you have any thoughts around this.
Yeah, I mean, I think speaking about fixes in general is a high standard, right? I think in general we do need a cultural change in tech and enterprises, but even on a societal level for women to thrive. However, this doesn't mean that women don't need to develop themselves, right? And
Mm.
first of all, because I mean, those cultural changes they take time, yeah. So you certainly don't want to wait until everything around you changes without doing anything. And I think in the meantime, we can really use AI to help us adapt to certain situations or to learn certain skills, like we talked about being able to share about your work authentically. And second, I really think that learning those skills is also a great benefit for everyone that learns those, right? It, it may be a little bit painful and awkward in the beginning, but for me, it's to learn to be more visible, to be more outspoken, to advocate for what I want, definitely helped me a lot. And I believe it would be the same for everyone else.
Yeah. And for maybe for women that I don't know, for some reason don't feel comfortable with technology or just don't really have that belief that the AI tools can really help them. I'm sure that you're having some similar situations while talking to so many women as a part of your Women in AI initiative. What do you usually advise to them in order to encourage and to really help them embrace the AI tools and point how this can help them in their career growth?
Yeah. Yeah, I usually just encourage them to start using it, and I ensure them that in order to use AI, especially the kind of tools that we have today, they don't have to understand each and every detail of how it works. Yeah, I mean, and if you feel more comfortable understanding a little bit behind what's behind the technology, then okay, then start reading some blog posts or look at some tutorials. If that gives you more confidence, totally great. But then really start using it soon, because then you'll find out it's really intuitive. And I've actually given quite a few lectures on AI basics and shown some basic tool usage, also in a women's network. And it was really surprising because a lot of women then just came to me after the talk and said, "Oh, they wouldn't have thought it would be so easy, so intuitive. They now really feel confident trying it out."
Yeah. So it's really about really getting started. I think the results and the outcomes will soon follow just as soon as you try it out in any of your routine tasks, because I think it's what you've mentioned in the very beginning. We have so many different routine things like align like stuff within your presentation. There is no really excitement perhaps about that. Well, it's rare if someone like face really experiences it, but it's so many of the different routine tasks that AI can help with. So finding out about it and just trying it out really is then what goes without any further encouragement to keep exploring it more and more and more. I think we have a few questions that we have some also time for. And I like, well, there are probably still two that I'd like to cover, but I like one which goes probably a little bit back to our conversation when we talked about the rules of the game and, knowing how to play it without being only within your shell, if we put it like this. So there is a question like, how do I know when to adapt and when it is the game that should be changed? Quite interesting question as well. If you have any thoughts about this, maybe Verena, I'd like to hear a little bit more because you are there really with your old skin experienced some of the cases, if not yourself personally. I know by working with other women, you sort of got so empathetic that it almost feels like your case.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a little bit what I was trying to explain with the last question, right?
Mhm.
So yes, we have change around us, organizational change, changing the game. And I do agree that it should be changed, and we can think about what are the things we can do to change it. But then at the same time, I think there needs, yes, changing the game takes time. It's not going to change from now to tomorrow, right? So in the meantime, it's also okay to adapt. And of course, you need to find a balance for yourself that feels fine, right? I am not advocating for anyone doing a lot of things in a way that feels inauthentic, but I'm also saying that sometimes you need to grow into some new behaviors, into some new ways of showing up, being visible, presenting yourself, that then in the end will become natural to you, and then will actually also benefit you. So I think there's this, we need to strike a balance between the two, but we also need to keep in mind changing the game will take longer.
Yeah. And we have another question. How to get hired in AI and or AI governance role with no previous AI or data science experience on your resume? Maybe Alexis, you've hired some people. What would you think when there is a role, AI governance related, and you're going through the resume? Well, apparently, person is eager to get started with that role because they've applied. But how would you treat the lack of any like actual experience in the data science?
Yeah, I don't, for me personally, I don't correlate AI governance with data science directly. So from my perspective, the data scientist work is very specific work. It's getting, of course, commoditized, and it's changes nowadays as well, but it's very different from what AI governance is. So AI governance is about really setting those principles and policies within the organization of how the AI will be used. And it will be specific, nowadays it will be even specific to geography. It will be specific to the industry, because some industries will be more sensitive to this and some will be less sensitive, as well as the applied use. So if organization only wants to use AI for internal chatbots, then your AI governance is not complicated there. But if you are working for some medical research university or something, which you really have to think about very thoroughly about everything which goes eventually through the eyes of AI. So, but back to this point, I think my question would be, what else is there on offer? So if a person says like, I'm applying for this role, I mean, in a common sense, there should be something about this. There should be something which either drives an extreme interest towards this role, or there has been some experiences in side fields, maybe with some data governance experience of the policy creation, or maybe some legal type of experience. So there is something which drives into this role, right? And if I believe that person understands this role very well, we should be able to have some productive conversation about this. Yeah. I can tell you the one thing which I can tell you from my perspective and kind of seeing how this been evolving over the years. In many roles today in data and AI, it's not necessarily to come with certain certification or anything of that type of hard proof. Yeah. It used to be maybe more back, then people look first and foremost into degree, into specific certification. But I see this kind of not getting diminished, no, but it's getting a little bit less attention. Because the space of our industry is also going so high. And if you get certified on some, very specific systems or tools, they might be already behind, right? So it's more of that intention and this ability to create your own clarity. Like, why do you apply for this role? What is what you bring through? And frankly, there is a lot of what AI can help you also to distill your knowledge, to position it for a specific job role. Yeah, that's another thing which we haven't touched, but that's one of those very common use cases today, that you take your resume and you tailor it towards the job position you're applying for. And it is done with the extreme help of AI.
Cool. Thank you very much for addressing this. And I actually have a set of final questions to each of you, like one for each, which is a bit more personal. But before we wrap up, I would just like to highlight something for our audience, some useful resources. Well, first of all, Verena is really sharing many more insights in her Women in AI newsletter that we have mentioned already today. But also, she's developing a coaching program for women, supporting both, like focusing on both career growth, but also well-being overall. So that's something that we will make sure to send as well after the webinar. So all of the links. Verena also is happy to address any questions that you will have offline around the topic of women in AI. So we will add all of the links, and we will also add a link to the book that Alexis wrote, where he reflects on his experience leading diverse teams at Microsoft and overall data strategies at Microsoft, as well as a link to our next webinar that we are going to hold on December 6th, where we will dive even deeper into AI and with a focus on the transformative potential that it has to really change the careers for all of us. So really not women only related, but the transformative power that it has. And that's going to be visible apparently very, very soon. And now on to the final questions that I've hold for the end. First to you, Alexis. So based on today's conversation, so you've led diverse teams for over 15 years. And as we've today heard, there are many practices, like a lot of observations that you've seen proved to help women in their career. But now, like today, as you hold back, what is your biggest regret? Like, is there anything that you wish that you did, but you didn't, or any lessons that you've learned in supporting women in tech?
Wow. It's a good one. You know, I will go back to where we started a little bit in that sense, right? So what I regret, we haven't maybe focused enough for all the years which we've been in a company, and we're driving our own growth, education and so on. I think we haven't spent enough time on those soft skills, yeah, like communication, negotiation strategy, coaching, those pretty classical things, but they always have this tendency to be missed. Again, like where we started, we are so focused on that what side, on that particular deliverable, on that timeline, on making somebody happy from your management, that you always postpone those trainings. Yeah? And I was happy to hear that Irina actually said she took many of those trainings. I was somewhat also successful in taking whole trainings as a manager, but I would say it was less available as the opportunity for non-managerial positions. And I think it's a miss, right? Many of those trainings, like situational leadership, for example, is absolutely brilliant for anybody, not just the managers. And to add to this also, I believe a lot of factual success on corporate careers is driven by some completely different factors. It is, how you talk. What's your audio image, let's say? How do you present? Virtually or in audiences? So these things, they are learnable. And, frankly, there are a lot of, different trainings available, typically for free. Absolutely. There are, if you go deep, yeah, they will be for some payment. But on that kind of high level, there are so many of those which are available immediately for consumption and absolutely free. And I think that side has been always kind of, neglected or underappreciated. Yeah. And then people see at the same time our top leaders, and they look and say, oh, they actually great speakers, they are such nice presenters, right? But, these people spend a lot of time being coached how to do it. Yeah, you watched yourself, I think, Satya Nadella on a stage in Las Vegas. And, it's very natural, it's very relaxed and so on. But, guess there are, hundreds of hours being spent on polishing this and learning how to do it. Right. So, and it's not that you will get to the point where Satya Nadella is and then you will start to learn it. No, you start to learn it now to get to the point where Satya Nadella is. So that's my biggest regret. I think that I haven't emphasized enough of those kind of soft skills, which in reality plays the most to your appearance and positioning in the enterprise.
100%. I just quickly want to second this because I had exactly the same discovery, right? That I was always focusing just on becoming better at tech stuff, but then in the end, it's really much more about your soft skills. And there's even studies that show that basically your emotional intelligence is a higher predictor or better predictor of your success than your IQ, so your intelligence quotient. Yeah.
Yeah. C-level is being coached for that, but I think it's very rare that people realize how important it is for everyone within the organization. I've myself personally have never seen the case that we need to coach people, employees, and how they present themselves. It's really rare, but the result could be very powerful. I just want to have an opportunity to ask a final question to you, Verena, as well. Also a bit more personal one and a bit reflective. Do you recall any moment where you were particularly challenged by the gender bias in your career? And how did you handle this? And what would you suggest, like advice to women in similar situations?
Yeah, I mean that's a tricky one. So especially
Sorry, coming out with a response for the end.
We're eager to know. We're eager to know.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, especially because I think gender bias is such a subtle thing, right? And it's mixed with so many confounding other factors that it's usually hard to pin down and say, okay, this was just gender bias, right?
Yeah.
Yet I did feel like I did encounter this kind of bias. Like I said, when certain people were surprised that I'm actually in a technical role and not in a product manager role or whatever. There is, however, one specific situation that was really feeling like a gender bias thing. That was in the beginning of my career, more or less, and I had been uninvited from a meeting with a client to present my work, with the reason being that the client only wants senior members in the meeting. So then someone else presented my work, and later on I found out that actually a colleague of mine who was roughly the same age and had joined the company a couple of months later than me was actually in the meeting and presenting his. So that definitely felt like gender bias. I didn't do anything at the time because I just felt overwhelmed, didn't know how to deal with it. I think now maybe what I would do is talk to the responsible manager and tell her or him how it felt for me. However, I mean, I do recognize it's a quite delicate conversation to have, and I would definitely think about whether I feel like this person would be able to hear my feedback or if they would just be defensive. Because if they just become defensive and you feel like you won't
There is
be
nothing
able
to
to
talk
talk.
about, really. No one
Exactly.
to.
There's no point.
Yeah.
There's no point in doing it. So my general advice is rather addressing gender bias in those strategies that we have discussed, right? So basically influencing other people's perception of you through showing your work, learning how to communicate, showing your competence, finding the right support network, right? So also building a network of people that don't have that bias or maybe, that appreciate what you do. And because I think addressing gender bias head on and straightforward is difficult and maybe not always leading to what you want.
Yeah. So it's really about working on that high level, not like looking into the particular situation, but working on that high level strategy, which we've discussed today. And That's been great. Thank you so much for sharing these personal stories, but also for sharing the insights. I don't think I have much to add now to all of this. Just thank you for speaking today, and thanks to everyone who joined us as well. We hope that this inspired you to use some of the strategies to really advance in technology. And we hope that we will speak to you again in the next webinar in early December, December 6th in particular. Thank you so much. You have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.